The airport was alive with the sound of rolling suitcases, boarding announcements, and hurried footsteps, but for one little girl, everything stopped the moment a flight attendant pointed toward the exit of the first-class cabin. Her tiny hands tightened around the worn teddy bear she had carried since her mother passed away. Her father stood frozen beside her, holding their boarding passes that clearly showed the seats he had spent years saving to afford. Every eye in the cabin turned toward them as whispers spread from row to row. The humiliation was unbearable, but what happened just minutes later would leave an entire airline speechless and remind everyone watching that true dignity can never be purchased. Before we begin this unforgettable story, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who still believes kindness changes lives, and subscribe to Heartline Stories if you believe that compassion and second chances still matter in today's world. Rowan Mercer had never imagined himself flying first class. At 36 years old, life had taught him that dreams often came with painful prices. 3 years earlier, his wife had lost a long battle with cancer, leaving him alone to raise their 8-year-old daughter, Iris. Every morning before sunrise he worked as an airport maintenance technician, repairing baggage belts, cleaning service equipment, and fixing whatever machines broke down before the first departures of the day. During the evenings he drove for a food delivery service until exhaustion blurred the city lights into streaks across his windshield. Every extra dollar disappeared into a savings account marked with a single handwritten note, "For Iris." Iris had inherited her mother's gentle smile and endless curiosity. She loved drawing airplanes, memorizing airline logos, and waving excitedly whenever she heard engines roaring across the sky. Since losing her mother, flying had become more than a hobby. It was her escape. She believed every airplane carried hope somewhere above the clouds. Rowan never corrected that innocent belief because it helped both of them survive the hardest nights. When Iris was diagnosed with a rare heart condition requiring surgery at a renowned children's hospital across the country, Rowan's world shattered once again. Doctors assured him the operation had an excellent success rate, but Iris's weakened heart meant unnecessary stress had to be avoided. Her cardiologist quietly suggested first class if possible because the extra space and calmer environment would reduce physical strain during the long flight. The words haunted Rowan. First class seemed impossible. The tickets cost more than he earned in months. Yet he refused to let impossibility decide his daughter's future. He sold the motorcycle he had restored with his late father years earlier. He cancelled every luxury, skipped meals during work breaks, worked holidays, birthdays, and weekends. Friends secretly collected donations, but Rowan accepted only enough to cover medical costs. The plane tickets were something he wanted to earn himself because he wanted Iris to know that her father would always move mountains for her. Months later, after endless sacrifices, he finally clicked the purchase button. 2 first-class seats. It felt like winning a lottery he never expected to enter. On the morning of the flight, sunlight poured through the airport's giant windows as if the day itself promised hope. Iris wore a bright yellow dress and held her teddy bear close while Rowan carried a backpack filled with medications, medical records, snacks, and her favorite coloring books. They reached the gate early, smiling despite the fear of surgery waiting on the other side of the journey. Boarding began smoothly. The flight attendant scanned their passes without concern. Rowan carefully helped Iris settle into the wide leather seat. She gasped softly at the large windows and whispered that it looked like a tiny hotel in the sky. For the first time in months, Rowan felt his shoulders relax. Then everything changed. Another flight attendant approached with a manager whose polished smile never reached his eyes. After staring at Rowan's clothes and worn backpack, the manager quietly demanded to see their boarding passes again. Rowan handed them over politely, assuming there had been a mistake. The manager frowned. He claimed there had been an error with the booking system. A wealthy businessman standing nearby casually mentioned he had been waiting for 2 first-class seats after a missed connection. The manager nodded toward him almost immediately. Without offering proof or apology, he informed Rowan that he and Iris would have to move to economy. Passengers began watching openly. Some looked uncomfortable. Others avoided eye contact. A few quietly assumed Rowan had somehow done something wrong. Rowan calmly explained his daughter's medical condition. He showed the doctor's recommendation. He explained how long he had saved. His voice never rose. Pride had taught him that shouting rarely changes unfair minds. The manager remained unmoved. He offered travel vouchers. He promised partial compensation. He insisted the airline had authority to reassign seats. Rowan looked down at Iris, who was trying very hard not to cry. She asked only one question. "Did I do something bad?" The words pierced every heart within earshot. Rowan knelt beside her and gently wiped away a tear before it could fall. He smiled despite the pain spreading through his chest. He told her she had done absolutely nothing wrong. Sometimes adults simply forgot how to be kind. Slowly, Rowan gathered their belongings. Neither of them argued. Neither caused a scene. They simply walked toward the cabin door carrying the weight of silent humiliation. But someone else had been watching. Captain Elias Vaughn had spent 28 years flying commercial aircraft. He had witnessed storms, emergencies, difficult passengers, and mechanical failures, but nothing unsettled him more than seeing dignity stripped away from people who had done nothing wrong. While completing final paperwork in the cockpit, he had overheard the entire exchange through the open cabin door. He quietly asked another crew member what had happened. When he learned that valid first-class passengers had been removed simply to satisfy a more influential traveler, something inside him refused to remain silent. Instead of preparing for departure, Captain Vaughn unbuckled his harness, stood up, adjusted his uniform jacket, and walked out of the cockpit. The cabin fell silent. Passengers immediately recognized the captain. He walked directly toward Rowan and Iris, who had nearly reached the aircraft door. Then, without hesitation, Captain Vaughn picked up Iris's small backpack himself. He looked directly at the manager. His calm voice echoed through the silent cabin. He explained that every passenger deserved respect regardless of appearance, income, or occupation. He reminded everyone present that safety came before schedules, and integrity came before convenience. Then he announced that until the airline honored the original boarding passes, he would not operate the aircraft. The silence became overwhelming. Phones quietly appeared as passengers began recording. The businessman who had expected the upgraded seats suddenly looked uncomfortable under dozens of watching eyes. Ground supervisors rushed aboard within minutes. They reviewed the reservation records. The truth appeared immediately. There had never been a booking error. The tickets belonged to Rowan and Iris exactly as purchased. The manager had simply decided that another customer seemed more deserving. His decision had nothing to do with policy. Everything to do with appearance. The supervisor apologized repeatedly. The manager was escorted off the aircraft before departure. Captain Vaughn personally guided Rowan and Iris back to their original seats. He knelt beside Iris and handed back her teddy bear with a gentle smile. For the first time that morning, she smiled again. The entire first-class cabin erupted into heartfelt applause. Some passengers wiped tears from their faces. Others stood in respect. No one applauded because first-class seats had been restored. They applauded because someone had chosen courage over comfort. As the aircraft climbed through brilliant afternoon skies, Captain Vaughn made an unexpected announcement. Without mentioning names, he reminded every passenger that kindness was never delayed by altitude and respect never depended on clothing, wealth, or titles. His words filled the cabin with quiet reflection. The flight became unlike any Rowan had ever experienced. Passengers introduced themselves. A retired nurse entertained Iris with stories about brave children she had cared for. A grandmother knitted a tiny blue scarf for the teddy bear. The businessman who had unknowingly benefited from the unfair decision quietly walked to Rowan's seat before landing. With genuine regret, he admitted he had never questioned why the seats suddenly became available. He apologized sincerely and later donated anonymously to the children's hospital where Iris would receive treatment. News of the incident spread rapidly after several passengers uploaded videos online. Millions watched Captain Vaughn calmly refusing to fly until justice was restored. Reporters praised his professionalism. Aviation workers across the country shared similar stories of choosing humanity over convenience. The airline launched an internal investigation. Within weeks, new training emphasized respect, bias awareness, and protecting vulnerable travelers. Captain Vaughn declined every television interview. He insisted he had simply done what any decent person should have done. Meanwhile, Rowan focused only on Iris. The surgery lasted several difficult hours. Every minute felt endless. Finally, the surgeon emerged smiling. The operation had been a complete success. Months passed. Iris's strength slowly returned. She could finally run through parks without losing her breath. She laughed more often. She filled notebooks with colorful airplane drawings again. One sunny afternoon, Rowan received an unexpected invitation. Captain Vaughn had arranged a special airport visit. Iris toured the cockpit of a parked aircraft, sat in the captain's seat, and looked through the enormous windshield stretching toward endless blue skies. Captain Vaughn handed her a small pair of toy pilot wings. He told her that courage was not measured by uniforms or titles. Courage was choosing what was right even when nobody expected it. Those words stayed with Iris for years. A decade later, thousands gathered inside an aviation academy graduation ceremony. Among the graduates stood a confident young woman wearing a crisp pilot uniform. Her name was Captain Iris Mercer. As she accepted her wings, Rowan watched from the front row with tears quietly running down his face. The frightened little girl who had once been told she didn't belong in first class had become someone trusted to carry hundreds of lives safely through the sky. After the ceremony, Iris visited a children's hospital in full uniform. She spent hours meeting young patients preparing for surgeries just as she once had. She told each child that difficult moments never define the rest of their lives. Sometimes the hardest days become the beginning of extraordinary journeys. Before leaving, she looked out through the hospital window toward airplanes crossing the afternoon sky. She silently thanked her father for every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every extra shift, and every moment he chose hope over despair. She also remembered one pilot who refused to stay seated when doing nothing would have been easier. Because of one act of courage, a little girl had learned that respect could change destinies. And because one father never stopped believing in his daughter, she eventually found herself guiding others safely above the clouds she once dreamed about from below. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with family and friends, and subscribe to Heartline Stories so more people can discover stories that remind us kindness still exists in the world.